As we're still in the season of doing V decks in preparation for the English V tournament coming up, I thought I might as well just do more of these V decks and cover the more obscure ones that you either haven't heard of before, people just haven't really given more modern coverage, or just talked about it in a more modern light. And today we're going to do Magus. Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Mrs. 4 here. Today I'm back with another V deck profile. Yes, I know I've been putting up some V, and you may be wondering by now, hey, are you going to do DBTO9? And frankly, the answer is yes, but not yet, because I want to take the time to actually do more V videos, especially with Bro. We know that in the Japanese format, they're going to give us the Vanguard Deluxe as a 3-people tournament with different formats, and there's going to be more V and P stuff as well. P does horribly on this channel. I did an Airleaf premium deck profile and no one cares. So I've decided to focus more on V, since A, V is more popular, B, V is a lot cheaper to get into for the average Japanese as compared to premium or even standard. So today we're going to be talking about Magus, which is a deck based on the manga. It's also a deck that came out in VBTO 3 and received some support here and there. Their most recent support is a promotional card from last year, which is this one. So we're going to go through it slowly, but relatively quickly at the same time. It's quite a straightforward Oracle Think Tank deck. I don't believe it needs much introduction. It's basically a huge beatdown OTK deck that can just pull out a lot of triggers and you just punch him in the face. Is this deck as good as Bell Sisters, Magus, Bell Sisters, Witches, or Susanoo? I'm not sure, but I do think that this has enough tools to be able to make it somewhat relevant. Or if you like the aesthetic, if you are a fan of, say, Hexa, or you like the Magus from the manga or from the V anime, then I think you will like this deck. Our grade 3s, we play 4 copies of that is Octagonal Magus, I believe. I can't remember. Then we play we play 4 copies of C Magus and then 2 copies of this one. So the grade 3 lineup is pretty big because we are still playing around a relatively old VR. By relative, I mean about second wave OTT VR. So I'll go into that. But this deck also has a trial deck called, because Maguses were a trial deck alongside Minor Rukami. So yeah, let's break it down real quick. I'll cover the VR first, with the main star of this deck. Her skills are very simple. The drive check triggers will give an additional 5,000 power. So basically that means as soon as you just pull, say, a critical trigger, that card is not going to give plus 10, it's going to give plus 15k. And it's a completely free effect, completely whatever effect, it's just there. So if you weren't convinced already that this is Hexa, or yeah, you can see it now. The second skill is when it attacks, you Soul Blast 1 grade 3 and you discard 5 cards from your hand, and this unit gains plus 3 drive. The discard cost of this card skill can be reduced for each Magus you have in the front row. Yeah, so what does that actually mean? What that actually means is relatively simple. So basically it's just charging up a lot of drives. You are going to get 5 drive checks that you generally just flip through. Even though you have to discard a lot of cards from your hand, it is first of all reduced as long as you build a board with Maguses, which it's the point of this deck. This deck does need to have a full board. But the issue with this deck is that you don't really have that much hand. So for pentagonal Magus over here, you don't really get that. But the thing is that as long as you fill the board, you're able to beat down and just put out quite a lot of damage against most decks, unless they have protects and whatnot. And you do have a multi-attacker in the form of the new PR, which is why that card is actually really important for this deck. So it does get plus 3 drive, so the total number of card drives is 5, and you discard one. You discard 1 less for each Magus, so that means you generally just discard 3 cards, and then after you gain 3 drives. So it is a net 0, so you do have to keep that in mind. And it's a turn 4 skill unless you use the PR. Next up, we have this one, who is from the trial deck, and this is from the comic booster. If you are old enough to remember, this is Hexagonal Magus. This one's different. This one is Pentagonal Magus. Pentagon's in 5. This is Hexagonal, which I believe is 6. I think it's 6. So the skill is when placed, count plus 1, look at 2 cards from the top of your deck, put 1 on top, and then put them in any order, and then you draw a card. So basically, you get to choose the draw that you want to draw and do, and then you leave the other card on top, which is nice because Maguses do actually stack the deck and have some top deck manipulation, although that's generally the main gimmick. Second skill of this unit is that when your drive check reveals a trigger unit while this unit is on VOR, she gains 5,000 power. So yeah, this is generally just a really nice card to play. But the reason why we only play two of is because on rearguard it's just like a 17k plus beater. It's just a beat stick, it doesn't really do much. Its main purpose is to ride, which you don't really ride into her, you want to ride into pentagonal Magus. But let's say you don't want to talk about pentagonal or rhombus. There's actually a much stronger card and a card that actually innovates OTT Premium. Premium, it's Fusilli Magus. And if you haven't heard of this card yet, you will now. Fusilli Magus is an insanely powerful rare, and I have no idea how they let this pass quality control, to be very honest. Count Blast 1, Soul Blast 1 is a X skill on VOR. One of your vanguards with Magus gains 10k in additional drive. So, for those of you who are aware, Oracle Think Tank has a restanding vanguard in Premium. Yeah, let that sit in. I faced this deck multiple times. But in V, what does this actually mean? This is one of the rare methods where OTT actually gets the plus for Maguses, which is in the form of a hard drive. And you need drives instead because this is how you generally kill. You just flip a lot of triggers and bam, you just kill them. So the thing is that it's on V on R, so if you ride it, it's still fine. If you call it, it's even better because that means you get to combo in with either a pentagonal Magus or no, a hexagonal Magus or pentagonal Magus. Man, I should not put the card so far away from me. I can't read it. So yeah, that's generally the grade 3 lineup. You could potentially play 9 grade 3s or 11 grade 3s because of, you need to soul blast a grade 3, but generally speaking, I find 10 to be more safe. I still have slots to play other solid grade 2s. The grade 1s of Maguses are not that good, so yeah, I would just say keep that in mind, but other than that, I think it's still alright to play with this ratio. Moving on to our grade 2s at long last, our grade 2s. This one's going to be quite interesting. We play 4 copies of Cubic Magus. Yes, Cubic, as in Yu-Gi-Oh's Cubics, We also play 4 copies of Rectangle Magus, and 4 copies of, this is one of my favorite cards from G, it's Rhombus Magus. So, yeah, let's actually just break this down real quick. I think I'm going to cover the PR first, because I feel that if I don't cover the PR, then you don't really get how this deck wins. The PR is the newest card in this deck. You can see it has a year printing on it, so you know it's new. Its skill is very simple. On VOR, you move one of your regards with Magus into the soul, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, you can put them in any order as you wish, and then you draw a card. So if that sounds familiar, it should, because it's very similar to the skill of her. And you will see this skill relatively often. While I said that Maguses don't really plus, they do have these weird stacking decks and drawing skills, but it's very 1-for-1. So you barely plus, it's a net 0 if I'm to be very honest. But it's nice to have a skill that doesn't cause any counter blast and can be used on turn 2 aggressively, or even moving on to the game like turn 3 onwards, because it's VOR. And it also sets up perfectly for your this is hexagonal Magus, because of the fact that you need to soul blast a grade 3. As long as you have any of my wonderful 10 grade 3s in your rearguard circle, you can just move them into the soul and trigger off the soul blast 1 grade 3. So it's very simple, and it will get even better from that. But let's stop here first and talk about its next skill. Her next skill is, V or R again once per turn, and then on battle that at the end of the battle that this unit attacks, it has to be her. Okay. If you have 6 units with Magus in this card name, count last one stand this unit. Yes, I said that correctly. This is a VOR restanding Vanguard, but that counts if you only have 6 Maguses on the field. And that's a huge problem, because you play a lot of grade 3 Maguses, as you see. You don't really have that many grade 2 or 1 Maguses, yet alone enough draw to sustain it. But let it be known that Maguses can grade 2 game with this thing. It's actually insane. Not only do you just check the top 2 cards with your deck, you now have a restanding Vanguard, but that's not what you're here for. It's also a restanding Rearguard, which means you can flip all the triggers you want with hexagonal Magus, and then you just pump it all to cubic Magus. And it's actually underrated how one card has really changed Maguses. I would say Maguses before this promo were easily like tier 12 or tier 13. They were slightly worse than end of stage. But right now, it's really insane that they actually have a card that fixes a lot of their problems. Is Magus going to be meta? Is Magus has been meta? No, not at all. But I feel that for such a fun and old school deck, then you certainly need to pick this at a 4th. If you can't find other Maguses, there are other Maguses you can play which I may go through later, for the rest of the different grades, but this is one you definitely have to play at 4. Next up, we're going to move on to Rectangle Magus, who's also from the trial deck. Rectangle Magus, very simple. She also got reprinted in Festival Collection, so keep that in mind. Rectangle Magus, when placed on Rega Circle, count +1, soul +1, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put them in any order and draw a card. Again, the same skill, but it's very expensive. Count +1, soul +1. Second skill is when you drive check with a trigger unit, it gains 5. Okay, very simple for a trial deck card, yet alone a 2018 V trial deck card, and it still doesn't feel that bad. So we are playing at 4 because it's one of the better Maguses. However, because of the fact that it costs count +1, soul +1, you may be inclined not to play this one, and frankly, I won't stop you. But you have to play 4 copies of my favorite girl, Rhombus Magus. Rhombus Magus, when she attacks, as long as your Vanguard has Magus in its name, she gains 5k, and if your opponent is grade 3 or greater, your opponent just grade 3, sorry. If your opponent is just grade 3, your opponent can't intercept. That doesn't matter because 7 Seas isn't meta yet. I'm talking in terms of the Luwat society that you currently live in. Good afternoon. But the other thing is just that it's just a 14k free attacker, regardless of whether you put trigger or not, which means on turn 2, you can already swing for quite a good magic number. That puts you over Cubic Magus, because Cubic Magus actually has no means of gaining power besides triggers, keep that in mind, and Rectangle Magus, who is hard reliant on you actually pulling a trigger, which is not as easy as you think. So, in terms of raw attacking, this is basically like your Fallon, or if you want to call it that. This is generally the only way you actually can gain power for completely free. You see there's no cost on this skill at all. So yeah, that's why I really like her, plus the art from G, from V, it's just really nice. I like her so much. Moving on to the grade 1s. The grade 1s, we played 3 copies of Crescent Magus, we played 4 copies of Tetra Magus, and 4 copies of Cure Magus. Yeah, you may notice some cards already are relatively similar, but yeah, I'm gonna go through it relatively quickly as well. So, just one thing I have to mention, this is also a trial deck card. It's Cure Magus. When placed on VRR, you just rearrange the top 2 cards of your deck any way you like. It's literally just any way you like. But the thing is that that's all it does. So you ride on turn 1, you can manipulate your next drive check, your next damage check, your draw from your V starter. You can do quite a lot, or even just placing it any time later, you still get to view it, but you don't gain any effects from Cure Magus. So just let that be known. Now, there are replacements you can play. You can also play Replace Magus. Replace Magus is a card that, as long as it boosts, if your Vanguard has Magus in its name, it gains 5,000 power, or you could just play Fusiling. This is Penny Magus, sorry. Penny Magus gains 5,000 power every time your drive check reveals a trigger. So it's quite similar to Replace, but the thing is that, this card generally gains more power as long as you high roll a bit more. So if you don't want to play Cure Magus, it's fine, but it's just a card that you get in the trial deck, so I figured I do have to mention it. But a card you definitely do have to play is Tetra Magus, who used to be a really, really expensive card. This thing almost was like 2,000 yen because of how good it is, but it got reprinted, so thank goodness. When placed on rearguard circle, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you get the counter +1. Sorry, if I have Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, you get counter +1, you draw. Yeah, you draw. And then if you have a critical trigger in your hand, you may put it on top of the deck from your hand. So if you actually stack a critical trigger on top, you are going net 0 because you drew and you put it back a crit. But if not, you can just draw and don't reveal, which is still a +1. So no matter how you look at it, it's still very beneficial, which surprises me. Like, from the bottom of my heart, this card really surprises me, and there's a very easy reason why this surprises me. This card was printed in 2018. This is a VBTO 3 style card in 2018, and they printed something this good for Oracle Think Tank. I bought the reprint because I can't afford the original, but it's just, it still eludes me that this is the kind of card they printed in 2018 while they still had random shit like Dragonic Dash Scythe, Blaster Blade. Like, how did this get through QR? Like, what were they feeding V Magus? Like, how have I completely missed out on this deck, not talking it at all for how many years? Man, I'm still dumbfounded the fact that I get a chance to play this deck. It's actually insane. This is a fourth, in case you can't tell. This is a fourth. And then last but not least, we also have Crescent Magus. Crescent Magus is a common, it's your only form of resource management. Her skill is when she's revealed in the trigger zone, you just soul +1 and counter charge 1. It doesn't net plus or minus you anything, it just needs to be a drive check, and you trade a soul for a counter charge, which is nice because you have Tetra Magus who turns your rear guards into soul, you know, and you don't always move grade 3 rear guards into soul. So you can actually use this in combination with a Crescent. You generally just use one Crescent skill per game, and that's fine. You may want to play Oracle Guardian Gemini, whom I actually brought a copy of here today. His skill is very simple. You just move him to the soul and counter charge 1 so long as you have 3 or more damage. It's okay, but you are minusing 1 with Gemini, but you get 1 soul, which is basically Bomb Mine. This thing's basically Bomb Mine. But Crescent Magus is also a Magus, so it does count towards your Magus count. The whole deck is filled with Maguses, that's why we don't play the Grade 3 Searcher. So yeah. Last but not least, just before I jump into the triggers and end this video, you can also play this card in your Grade 2 lineup in case you can't afford any of the options I've just mentioned. With the exception of Cubic Magus, the promo, which is a must play, her skill is very simple. Just during your turn, she gains 2000 power, and then of course, when she attacks, you get to look at the top card of your deck. So Stellar Magus here is an 11k beater. It's just an 11k beater, as long as it's boosted. And when it hits, you can just put a card from my hand on top of the deck. Yeah, you just do that, and it's a -1, yeah, but it is able to reach magic numbers because it's 9 + 2, 11 + 8, generally for your boosters. And you can stack the top of your deck in terms of triggers you want, even though it's a -1. So do keep that in mind. The only issue with this card, and the reason why this card does not see play for my list, is because of the fact that I actually want Pentagonal Magus to be the first attacker. So I can't be betting on a non-hit for me to actually be stacking my triggers. That just won't cut it. And finally, I've covered enough of all that. I want to talk about the triggers. The triggers of this deck are very, very simple. It is your standard for draw PG, and then we talk about 8 criticals here, and then we have our starter, which has to be Los Angeles Magus. It has to be. And then of course for Heal Guards. Now I say of course, but it's not actually that obvious. Why am I playing Heal Guards in this deck? Why I'm playing Heal Guards in this deck is because of a very simple reason. I need the grade 3 count in Soul. Anything that I just casually soul charge is going to be nice, especially against the M1 matchup. Yes, that is real too. But it's also because I don't need that much counterblast in the early game. And if you notice, I do need some counterblast here and there for one-to-one skills, but I don't actually need it like Vanquisher style. I know that the heal trigger is a Magus. I know they did print that. Yes, I acknowledge that fully, but this deck really just needs more early game defense, because in the late game you're really just pressing more. You don't want to be, dying, taking so much damage in the early game, and in the late game a simple attack or two from a more deadlier deck like say, Vanquisher, and then you just lose, or just taking a hit from a Steam Maiden and you just lose. No, you don't really want that. So you want to be able to play an early game that allows you to attack early and guard early, and in the late game you can take as much damage as you need before you OTK your opponent. It sounds very jank. It is jank. This deck is by no means a meta deck, but yeah, that's generally just how you want to approach it. And that covers the Magus deck profile. As you can see, this deck has very old cards, and I mean very, very old cards. But at the same time, you can see that some of these old cards have completely stood the test of time. You have stuff like Tetra Magus, you have stuff like Fusilli Magus. They're all just really good, and you have new blood in the form of Cubic Magus. So, and in conclusion, would I say it's worthwhile to pick up this deck? If you like the Hexa Orb aesthetic, if you like this kind of gameplay, I say yes. I think it's really fun. But if you are looking for a stronger OTT deck, this is not it. But if you also happen to be a complete simp for Rhombus Magus, then I say yes, buy this deck like me, because that's exactly why I bought this deck for. Thank you all so much for watching. We will be going through more V decks for the rest of this month, or for as much as I can. I'm really just doing this just to go in conjunction with the V Bro event because I know that's something that's coming up. You know, a V Series tournament for English is not say very often, so I do want to actually do it because for the rest of the year, I believe, at least for Bro, there won't be any more V. So yeah, I just want to cover as much as I can because V is a really fun format. As much as you've heard horror stories about V, I still feel that it has its merits. It has no over trigger. It's very, very affordable to get into. So I don't believe Bushiroad should be killing V or P for that matter. Bushiroad should maintain all formats in my opinion. It doesn't really cost them a cent, right? I mean, how much does it cost to say we are not cancelling the format? Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time. Take care.